of purchases, including helping people buy properties from auctions and from bankruptcy sales. Expert at assisting buyers who think they can't buy and sellers who think they can't sell. Lisa and I have been partners for about 10 years now, and we're still going strong. She's a true lover of our outdoor areas and our national parks.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you so much for those kind words. And I have the pleasure of introducing Christine Donovan, who Andy and I got to know through, we both have the same coach for our real estate businesses. And so we got to know each other and have been working together for a while now. Christine is located in Orange County. She's an Orange County 5-star realtor and founded her company in 1999 after a successful career as a corporate attorney. And I have to tell you, Ann and I were saying we thought that the switch was a good idea. Walking in the footsteps of her family, she's a 4th-generation realtor who shares her knowledge through public speaking and has written over 100 articles and made media appearances in both local and national media. She has extensive experience in mortgage options, which allows her to guide her clients to creative solutions that fit their specific needs. As an attorney, she's qualified to help her clients understand and navigate the legal complexities and guidelines of the real estate process with confidence. So Christine and I have a lot in common. We're both real big problem solvers for real big problems.
It's important in real estate. And today I have the pleasure of introducing Andy, and he's been a licensed realtor for over 20 years in the Las Vegas market. He's assisted hundreds of homeowners to reach their dreams of homeownership using his patience and understanding of what they need. He's taken on the specialty of focusing on many of their local veterans who need to have an agent that understands what it takes to be able to best utilize their VA benefits. His clients say that he is a joy to work with, incredibly available at all times, and that he always has their best interest at heart. Andy and his wife, Olga, love nature, hiking, and other outdoor activities.
Thank you.
Thanks. So we're so happy that you've joined us today. We're also on Facebook Live, so there'll be people joining us there as well. And we have somebody kind of monitoring that in case any questions come up. But we'd like to ask each of you to maybe introduce yourself and let us know why you're here or what investment experience you've had. And Mary, since you have a family relationship here, would you like to start?
Yes, my name is Mary Lou Finney. I've been licensed in real estate since 1976. I specialize in loans of all types. And I think tonight we might be talking about investments. So that's something I've prepared for. I don't know. Difficult doesn't bother me. Credit repair doesn't bother me. We've done lots and lots of transactions and put thousands of people into homes, and it's very rewarding. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. And would anyone else like to unmute and just maybe say why you're here? I have a former client on Kibwe Trim. He was a basketball player, professional basketball player when I met him. It's always fun to drive around with somebody who's like a foot taller than you are or more. But I know now he's got lots of other things going on. He's also a new dad and going to be a new dad again. He's one of my favorite people. I don't know, Kibwe, do you want to say hi?
Oh, sure. After that, I don't have a choice now, do I? Well, yeah, as Lisa said, you know, I was one of her clients. I think it maybe was my first property that I ever bought. Lisa helped me find. Yeah. You know, I was playing ball. That was, I think, back in 2013. And, you know, that's when I started my investment journey. I've since bought a few other properties, but, you know, Lisa walked me through the process. We went out in Vegas. I think first time we tried, we kind of struck out. And, you know, Lisa kind of kept her nose to the ground and, you know, got me going. And I still have that. I still own that condo in Vegas. I've held it for a long time. And, you know, I'm just on here just because I saw Lisa throw it up. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be in the gym, but I'm just going to hop on and see what's going on. You never know what I could learn, you know, so I was just happy to, you know, show support and at the same time, maybe learn a thing or two. So thank you guys for having me.
Thanks for being here. Anybody else like to say anything? And feel free to use the chat too, if you want to ask any questions while we're talking. But we're all really glad that you're here. So we had said, in our emails that we're going out, we're going to answer some questions. For instance, when you should consider investing in real estate, and Christine's gonna kick us off with that.
Thank you, Lisa. I think for me, if you're thinking about it and you can invest, then it's likely a good time to buy real estate. The other thing to think about is that if you already own a home, if you live in a house that you own, you already are a real estate investor, whether you think of yourself that way or not. And if you are, maybe it's time to think about actually looking at it as an investment. Maybe it's time to rent out that home and buy your next dream home. And maybe time to move into something different, something larger, different thing, so that you've got that opportunity to rent that out and move on. I know, for instance, my sister, who's also a realtor out in Dallas, she has a program for her clients where every 2 to 3 years, they move out of their current home, they rent that one out, and they move on to the next one. And I think one of the good things to talk about here maybe is, why would you invest? What are the reasons to invest? And maybe that seems obvious to some, and maybe it doesn't to others. And when I look at it, I think of it as one of the very best ways that we can use leverage in an investment. Not very easy to leverage when you're buying stocks. Yet with an owner-occupied property, you can buy for as little as $0 down, depending on your situation, meaning that you are using someone else's money, the lender's money, to increase your wealth and grow your equity. And for me, again, as you'd mentioned, Lisa, I have a family of real estate forever and ever. And I watched my grandmother, she took money that she made from the stock market, she made down payments on a number of properties throughout Southern California, and had her own little mini and real estate empire as a result of it. She couldn't have done that without the power of leverage. She wouldn't have had the ability. So what else? You can force appreciation. Some people might have heard of sweat equity. You buy a house, you put some work into it. You can't force appreciation in a lot of your other investments and a lot of your other assets. And then finally, there may be tax advantages to owning property and or having mortgages. And if the rest of you have some other thoughts, those were kind of my thoughts for maybe when and why you might want to invest in real estate.
Well, I always like to say, if you're a homeowner, you've invested in real estate. And that's usually the first opportunity that we get to actually, normal people like us get to start, actually building some personal wealth is when we buy our first homes.
It's the biggest investment that most of our lifetime is a home, and it's the best long-term investment as well.
Yeah,
It's true.
Investment real estate helps you a lot on your personal income taxes because there's depreciation on each property that you own over a period of years. And that could take some of your other earnings and shelter them, because you definitely reduce the amount of taxes that you're paying.
and I think what Mary is saying really leads us to another. It's important to have a really good accountant that you can turn to and make suggestions about holding, buying, where and when. We're going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later, but I think that we should all bear in mind that having a good realtor and a good accountant are the ways to get started in real estate investment. I don't know why I got this topic. It's the downsides to real estate investment. Why me? I don't think there are any. Although having lived through the recession and seen people, lose their homes or need to figure out how to get out of trouble when they were upside down in their homes. That was a downside, but that was something that was really created by a lot of circumstances out of individual buyers' control. But the downside, and so that's a downside. If you're buying high and then properties go down, if you can't afford to keep the house, that's a downside. But if you can't afford to keep the house, and here in Las Vegas, a lot of people did. Am I speaking? Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
I'd like to check that. that, it does come back. Real estate can be cyclical. And so if you can hang in there, it's still, one of the best investments around. I don't know too many people who haven't seen in the last, 10 years, 11 years, a real turnaround. And of course, in the last couple of years. But the other downside is, do you really want to be a landlord? That can be that can be a drag, taking care of properties, unless you've got a good property manager or it's your thing. I have a couple clients, they were young kids when they first came here, and they started buying properties. They bought their first property high, and they lost a lot of equity in it, but they were able to keep the property, and they started buying the properties as the prices went down. They manage their own, and they love it. They take care of it, and it's actually they've both stopped doing their other jobs and are doing that. And that's worked out really well for them. I realize I'm not talking about downsides, but if you don't want to be, if you get tired of being a landlord, there are other options. Giveaway and I have actually talked about investing in notes instead of in real property, and then you're not a landlord. The returns aren't as good, but they can be consistent, and you don't have to be fixing a toilet at midnight. So that can be a real downside too. But I think in general, if a good investment portfolio really does need to contain at least some investment in real estate. So there's, you want to make sure that you're buying at the right time, but you also want, be committed to holding for a while, because stocks go up and down. Real estate typically will increase the longer that you hold it. Yeah.
And I think that's really important, Lisa, because we saw in Orange County, like you did in Vegas, we saw a huge loss in value. And some people couldn't hold their houses. Those who did and were able to come through the other side of the recession have seen a tremendous increase in value. And I think that's something really important when you look at the downside of real estate, is the ability to hold. You need to know that there is a good chance that at some point your value is going to drop. And if you buy in a way that you can still hold and maintain, then it's not as big of a deal. Mm-hmm. The problem is that if you cannot afford to have the property when the value goes down for whatever reason, I think that's where people run into issues.
Yeah, for sure. And we have seen that. I will say that on the bright side, a lot of the people who I helped short sale their houses during the recession, I would guess half of them came back once they could buy again and bought and now have homes again. So they're we can get people through those things, which is why it's so important to me to help people when they're having trouble. Because if you look at it as a long-term investment plan, you can come out okay on it, like you were saying, Christine.
Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
Anybody else have any thoughts on the downsides? No?
What, no war stories to tell us about your investments?
Oh, we've probably got a few of those. I
bet.
Yeah, tenants can be difficult, and sometimes you have damage in properties, mm-hmm. and sometimes you have loss of income, and sometimes you have loss of income because they're there, or you might have loss of income because of the damage and you've got to get it fixed before you can have them back in. It is not perfect. However, I don't know that there are many investments that are.
No. Well, and of course, right now we're dealing with the situation where we had the eviction moratorium and kind of waiting to see how that pans out. But one thing I have noticed, we haven't, at least here in Las Vegas, we're not seeing a real increase in evictions. So I think that although people were concerned, and I'd be curious to what's going on in Orange County, but at least here, things seem to have stabilized. And I know at least with the investment properties that I'm involved in, mm-hmm. we managed to get through it. And people managed to keep paying, or we were able to work something out with them.
We've seen some issues. The state did step in here in California, mm-hmm. and did help to pay back rent for a number of people.
Arizona.
Okay, in Arizona, there we go. who were unable to pay. So I think that was a help too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think things are getting a little bit more normalized. And again, we're going to go through moments with that. And I think it's really important for people who are looking to invest that they keep a little bit of an emergency fund and that they understand that it is not always a perfect trajectory. And they need to understand and be willing to work through that in order to be successful in the investment in real estate.
Mhm.
All the negative sides to real estate. You look around right now, there's really nowhere else you could put your money that seems to be as likely to grow. But we're getting interest rates and everything else wherever else we put our money, barely making anything for us. So even with the downside, I think it's the place to go.
Good, good. And we're going to talk about how financing works if you're going to if you're going to finance your investment property. And Mary's going to talk to us about that.
Hello. Well, typically, if you're going to buy a regular real estate property, your down payment is approximately 25%. You can buy a house or a condo with 20% down, but you'll find that your interest rates are a little higher that way. So if you can manage 25%, I recommend it. That works up to 4 units. If you're going to be buying in the higher multifamily of 5 units and up, you normally need 30% down. The rates are still very, very good. So as long as you can afford the purchase price, you know, the loans are totally available and they're really well priced. I mean, I've been doing this since 1976, and I remember when 8.625 was a great rate. We called it refi mania. It was about 1986. So we're down in the 3s and the 4s, depending on what type of loan you're looking for. So anywhere between 20 and 30% down, you can obtain an investment property. So I pass on to my next person.
I've had investors both get loans and also pay cash, and I haven't really heard of anyone who had a lot of trouble with that, especially more recently. And again, when you're talking about maybe like Christine was talking about leveraging, that's really what, you know, leverage the equity in your current home to be able to buy another and start building a real estate empire, you know, a couple houses.
If you refinance your current house, you can take a lot of cash out because most of them have gone up in value significantly. And that might be the cheapest thing to do, depending on what your plan is. The other thing you can do is get an equity credit line in second position and have it available if you find something you want to buy. Equity credit lines are typically 10-year interest only, then 20-year fully amortized to pay off. But like I said, a refi first in the 2s or the 3s is really, really inexpensive money.
Is that the way you've seen most people invest, Mary, over the years, with taking money out of their primary towards investment properties?
Have I seen that? Many, many times. And they're fine. You know, you just have to watch where you buy, what you buy, and then you have to manage it properly too. And you need to check your cash flow on what you're doing to make sure that you can manage it. It's okay to have some negative cash flow, but you better have some good reserves.
Okay. You want me to go on to the next topic?
Yeah,
Sure.
Okay. So can everybody hear me?
Yes.
it's much better now.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'm going to talk about some of the hidden costs that can be involved that you might not be aware of when you're starting to invest in real estate. Just like any other property you have, you're going to have property taxes, you're going to have insurance, and if there's a homeowner association, you're going to have to pay the homeowner association fees as well. It's worth mentioning that rental homes can cost more for insurance than your primary homeowner's residential policy. So just something to keep in mind that, you know, those costs are going to be there. So you're going to have to factor that in when you're figuring out what to charge for rent so that you're going to turn a profit. He was talking a little bit earlier about some maintenance issues you could have with your house as well. You have to keep house running properly, whether you're having a problem with the AC or the heat or hot water goes out. I mean, these are things that are going to happen in the course of owning a property. So one of the things that we would suggest is to try to get these issues kind of solved at the beginning of the time that you buy the house. So you might want to renovate the property a little bit just to get the standard up so that you're not going to have so many maintenance issues right away, at least. You might spend some money fixing it up, but in the long run, it'll probably be worth it. And one of the things I know a lot of the landlords that I've worked with over the years, they often get a home warranty policy on their rental properties, which is a good thing because they do cover a lot of things that come up in the course of a year, and it'll save you some money and it'll save you some aggravation as well. We were also talking briefly about you could have vacancies. No matter how nice the house is, there's going to be times where it's probably going to be vacant. And those are months that you're not going to collect any money, but everything you pay towards the house is still going to be due. If you have a mortgage on the house, it's going to still have to be paid. Homeowner association are still going to have to be paid. So as we were saying earlier, you really want to make sure you have an emergency fund to be able to cover the months that you don't have somebody in the property. I mean, if no one's in the property for a few months, you don't want to not be paying your mortgage. You want to make sure you can keep up with all the payments that are required to own the house. And another thing we talked about is you got to have a good team. That'll be the most expensive cost for owning a rental property would be if you didn't have good people to work with. It can get very expensive. You want to make sure that you're working with a team of people that are always going to have your best interests at heart. And that would be from your real estate agent to a property management team to maintenance people that are going to fix stuff for you when they break. And like Lisa mentioned earlier, you really need to have a good accountant. That's going to be really important for taxes and to make sure that your business, and it is a business to own homes, you want to make sure that your business is running properly. People that are on your team, you want to treat them like business partners, because if you hire the wrong people, that's going to be your biggest cost, as I said, and it's going to cause you the most aggravation down the road as well. Anybody else have any other costs that might be involved when you're purchasing a rental property?
I think that covers a lot of it.
Well, you also have escrow, title, loan fees and all that sort of thing too, which you're probably going to be aware of, but it's in addition to the purchase price.
Just like when you would buy your own primary residence, and those fees should be about the same as if you're buying a primary.
And to talk to you briefly about what you said about a home warranty, I think they're wonderful. And you can continue to keep them even after the first year that you own the property. And I have a lot of rentals and I always have warranties on them, and it helps me have the right kind of technician to come fix the problem too. For $75, I call the company, they send somebody out, and it's not always covered, but it oftentimes is, even a brand new air conditioner. So that's a big help.
Yeah. We haven't really mentioned much about property management teams. That's something else. I don't know if everybody on here is familiar with them, but that's a good thing to have too, because being a landlord can be tough. You mentioned before you could get a call that the toilet's broken at 2 a.m. And if you have a property management team, they deal with all that for you and handle the repairs generally as well.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think that covers a lot of it. And at least my personal experience has also been sometimes you can pass on that $75 cost to the tenant, where they can contact the home warranty company and pay the $75 fee. And then the rest of it, of course, is covered by the home warranty. So it's possible to do some creative defraying of expenses as well. And I've never experienced a situation where the tenant objected. It's in the lease, and they know that that can happen. And it's also, of course, then some encouragement to take good care of things so that they don't break. There's a lot of times people, and we've talked about this, are looking for ways to shelter taxes when if they've started investing in real estate. And I'll just share a strategy I recently learned when one of my clients sold a property, an investment property in California, and wanted to reinvest it here because she could do so well here. She already owns several properties, and both the price is low and rents are high, and it's just good. And her accountant, go back to get yourself a good accountant, suggested to her that she invest in what's called an opportunity zone. And the opportunity zones were set up by the federal government, I think about 2015, to assist in the redevelopment of areas that were struggling, and it was thought to get investors investing there and helping to fix up houses and bring up neighborhoods. And so there are lots of these opportunity zones all over the country. And so I did a lot of research on the ones here in Las Vegas and also in Henderson, and came up with with a house that she was able to purchase with the funds that she had gotten from the sale of the house in California. She saved herself $30,000 in taxes. And this isn't a 1031 exchange, which Christine's going to talk about a little bit. Depending on how you make the purchase and what you do with the money and how you got it, it could very well eliminate the tax. It's not just deferring it. And of course, the crazy thing is she buys this house in this development area, and rents are going up so much that she's making more on this house than she does on her others, because she tends not to raise her rents until people move. But one thing that, at least here, and it could be in other areas, the city of Henderson overlaid that development zone with a redevelopment zone of their own, so that when you buy there, whatever work you do on the outside of the house, the front of the house, the city will help with that painting and landscaping. If you are a homeowner, you get a really good help. It's not quite as good if you're an investor, but that money is still available to you to fix up your house, and it's a way of defraying some of that expense of holding the home. So I think that I didn't know about it, and I'm a big proponent of it now. And the one thing I did notice in those neighborhoods is that you could tell the houses that were taking advantage of that. Some of the houses were looking really good. Some of the houses, not yet, but you could see that the neighborhoods were improving, and then both the redevelopment zone and the opportunity zones were actually fulfilling the purpose that they had been put in place for, which is pretty cool. I'm a big proponent of it right now, especially when you're saving all that money in taxes. And it's I think a really good alternative to the 1031 exchange. But Christine's going to tell us a little bit about 1031 exchanges.
I'll get to that in 1 second. Lisa, when you started talking to me about opportunity zones, I decided to look and see if there were any around me. And I discovered there were, not too far away. And so I just did a little bit of math just for fun. And I didn't get into the tax part of it because I'm not an accountant. But what I saw is that with 35% down, looking at where the rents are right now, they look like they cash flow without any idea of what the tax advantages are. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was really interesting and something that I would actually like to talk to my accountant about, so that I've got information both for myself and then for other clients. So Thank you. I appreciate your bringing that to my attention, because I've not heard of it.
No, it's a really good chance. And we do it, sometimes, especially in California, people are taking advantage of those high high equity returns, selling their properties and looking to invest in places like Las Vegas, where you're going to be able to actually make some money on your investment.
It was a smooth deal for you, Lisa, wasn't it? You really didn't have any extra problems due to the opportunity zone.
I didn't have to do it, no, because there was no, none of the requirements that are required in the 1031 exchange. She, got her money. She paid cash for the house, but I know that money just was paid from her escrow to her bank account and from her bank account to escrow to finish that purchase. It was very simple, no fees, like there might be in other situations. It was really easy. The hardest part, of course, was duking it out with everybody to get the house, but we did. And it leased up immediately. Yeah, she did some work on it, but it leased up right away.
So Lisa, you'd asked her, we were talking about 1031 exchanges. The attorney in me is going to give you a disclaimer, and I'm going to read it right from here. Before we get started, the attorney in me must provide a disclaimer that we are not providing legal nor tax advice. And that goes for this whole seminar, guys, with the information here. Regarding 1031 exchange, I always strongly recommend talking with your accountant or your CPA and your 1031 accommodator for any answers to your questions so you can make the best decisions about your personal situation. All right, I got that out of the way. Wanted to give all of you a basic overview of what a 1031 exchange is and why would you do one. The biggest reason is that it defers taxes. And it can defer some really big numbers of taxes. So currently, if you have a capital gains event with the federal government, you can pay as much as 20% in your federal taxes for your capital gains, plus an additional 3.8% potential surtax. So you're up at almost 24%. So let's say you made $200,000, and around here you can make a whole lot more than that depending on how long you've held the property. But if you look at $48,000, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money that you could potentially lose. And that doesn't even talk about the state taxes, which in California can be as high, I believe, as 12.3% on top of what you were paying to the federal. And now that lovely little batch of cash you thought you had may not be as big as you thought it was. And so that's why a lot of people might want to take advantage of a 1031 exchange. And what that requires is that you exchange one investment property for another investment property and that you have to follow certain requirements. And one of the important pieces of this, I'd mentioned the 1031 accommodator, and that is a company that actually steps in the middle of the transaction to facilitate the money coming in from the property that you sell and going into the property that you're buying so that the seller never actually gets their hands on the money from that first property. And that's one of the rules with regards to the exchanges and part of the reason that you need the accommodators. And the accommodators work with escrow to take those funds and deal with them as they need to be done so that it's properly handled so that you have an effective 1031 exchange and don't wind up with all that taxes having to be paid, at least for now. It is a deferral. It's not like Lisa was talking about with regards to these opportunity zones where there may actually be a way to get rid of the taxes. This is deferring the taxes until later. So that's the purpose of the 1031. Now, there's some important things that people have to think about when they identify a 1031 or when they decide to do that, especially in the markets we've been having. When you are doing a 1031 exchange, you have 45 days to identify the properties after the close of escrow of your first property. Now, in the market that most of us have been living in for the last year, it can be really hard to be the winner. So identifying just 3 properties can be a little bit nerve-wracking. So the rules on that are, like I said, 45 days after close of escrow, you can identify 3 properties. Or, for instance, if somebody were to sell here and then buy in Vegas, they might need more than 3 properties to get to the value that they need to exchange. So if that's the case and you're going to identify more than 3 properties, it's up to 200% of the value of the house that you sold. So for instance, if you sell a $500,000 house, you can identify properties up to $1 million because that's double the sale value. So that's part of it. And then to defer the taxes, to defer all of the taxes, and there's a way to do a portion of it. I am not going to get into that. I'm going to leave that up to an accommodator or an accountant. In general, though, if you're wanting to defer all of your taxes, you have to spend on your next property as much as your net proceeds from your previous property. So if you made 500, you have to spend 500 if you don't want to pay any of the taxes. In addition, let's say you had a $200,000 mortgage on that house, you have to have at least a $200,000 mortgage on the next property. So these are all part of the requirements. Now, we talked about leverage before. Another reason somebody might choose to do a 1031, let's pretend, for instance, they had a property here in California, $1 million property. They sell it, they get $1 million out of it. Now what they're choosing maybe is to leverage into a $2 million property. Maybe they're buying a fourplex or whatever the situation might be. They can put that $1 million in, defer the taxes, and maybe get $1 million loan so that they've really increased the leverage of what they have. So those are some of the reasons they might go ahead to choose to, might choose to do it rather than paying the capital gains, things like that.
Oops.
I don't know why the video keeps stopping. I apologize. So anyway, that's what I had as far as basics on 1031. They get a lot more complicated. That's just a real brief overview. So any other thoughts from any of the rest of you or any questions?
Just one comment. Sometimes if you have older clients that need to do a 1031 tax deferred exchange, but they really don't want another 1 to 4 units, they can buy another type of investment that can be allowed to have a tax deferred exchange. And that's a whole nother thing. And as agents, lots of times you can get paid on those as well.
That's great information, Mary, because I think we always hear the like for like, but I think with good financial advice, that trusted financial advisor, there's a lot more opportunity out there than people realize. One thing I didn't mention when I was talking about opportunity zones is that usually you don't have to designate properties like you do with the 1031 exchange, but you usually have to make the purchase within 180 days of the sale for the funds that you're using for the new.
Thank you, Lisa. That's the case on 1031, and I don't think I mentioned that. You have to close on one of those identified properties within 180 days of the close of escrow of the previous property.
Yeah. So those are all important to know. And it's also important to have a good real estate advisor who knows these dates and has them in your file so that you don't miss anything that might cost you some money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anybody have any other thoughts about development or tax deferment or getting out of paying those taxes? No. One of the things we wanted to talk about is property taxes, because we like to talk about that in Nevada. So Christine's going to give us a little overview of property tax, because it's interesting actually. In California, they have a lot of rules than we do here, so it's a little more complicated.
We have something that we really like sometimes. Yeah. We have Proposition 13, which has been in place since about 1978 or 1979. And it is an advantage for people who've held their properties for a long time. For instance, people might have purchased a house down at the beach in Newport for $100,000 that today is worth, let's call, $4 million. And with Prop 13, they start their basis from when they purchased it. And then the tax can only go up 2% per year. So we've had years of double-digit increases a number of times over the years. And in those years, people are still only going to see 2%. And the reason this was put in place originally is when California prices started going up so quickly, people were actually losing their homes because they couldn't afford to pay their taxes, was the reason that this was put in place. However, going back to my $100,000 example, let's pretend they've held it for 30 years, and I'm not going to do the math, leave that to somebody else, but I'm going to give you an idea. Let's pretend their tax basis has gone from, say, $100,000 to $200,000 in the intervening years. And our taxes are about 1%, give or take, in the older areas. We've got other areas with Belarus and other kinds of taxes. I'm going to stick with the simple stuff. So using the idea of 1% on a $200,000 basis, they're paying $2,000 a year on taxes. Their neighbor next door, who bought the $4 million house, is looking at a $40,000 tax bill. Right? Did I do my math right? I think I've got my zeros in the right place. And so that can be a major benefit for people to want to keep a house in place. Now, we do have something in California, it's a new law, and so we're still trying to figure out some of the pieces. We've had some of it in place. Now it's throughout the state, where we have a rule that says over the age of 55, under a bunch of specific circumstances, and if anybody's interested, I'll go into them. I'm not going to get into them right now. You can actually take that tax basis with you, particularly if you don't buy a house more expensive than the one you sold. So if you own the $4 million house with a $200,000 tax base and you buy a $3 million house, rather than paying $30,000 in taxes, you can take your $2,000 with you to your next house under certain circumstances. And so that can be really important, because our taxes, even though we might have low rates, can get really expensive just because of the cost of houses. So it's really important that you have somebody who understands that and make sure that you get the right forms and get things into the assessor's office so that you can take advantage where you can of the things like Prop 13, Prop 6090, and some of the other propositions that we have. So that's one of the things that I find fascinating here.
Yeah, and I've talked with people in other states. Florida is a good example of how that keeps people in their homes, which exacerbates our inventory shortage, because people can't afford to lose their property tax benefit. And so you find whereas if something were done like they've done a bit of it in California, or making it portable so that you could take that with you to your next house, and only when and not lose it, because it's something that people on fixed incomes need. And it certainly would, I think, help our real estate inventory shortage, wherever that's creating a problem. Wherever
that's what we're hoping for. It's new here that it's portable. It used to be one-time portable over the age of 55, sort of in some counties under very limited circumstances. It's now a little bit broader, and we're hoping as we get through where we are right now, maybe it'll allow people to be more willing to sell their houses.
We'll have to revisit this.
I'm sorry, what was that called, Christine?
Proposition 13 is the one from the 70s. And I believe that, is it Prop 19, Mary Lou? I think that's the one that just passed. I apologize.
Yes,
it is a brand new law.
There's two that passed, and I don't know that I know the numbers of them, and one of them is related to commercial and industrial, that's going to take the caps off of the property taxes, which is going to be a big hurt eventually, but it doesn't take place for about 2 years, I believe.
So they gave they gave in some ways and they took in others, as happens sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and we're not sure where commercial property is going anymore after our last year and a half.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Well, does anyone have any specific questions they'd like to ask? Feel free to unmute or put it in the chat. I know that somebody's watching Facebook, but we I haven't seen anything from there, but if anyone has a question or a comment, or if you have a suggestion for a different topic, or for us to dive into a topic more deeply, because we'll keep doing these. They're kind of fun.
They are.
and I learn a lot because I get to hear what other people are doing. And so if you have an interest in a particular topic that you'd like to see addressed, we certainly can do that.
Our property taxes, just for people who aren't aware, generally, we usually figure them to be around 1%, but they're actually usually a little bit lower. People are usually happy when they're relocating here from another state and they see that, that we don't have state income tax, and our property tax, generally under 1% is a lot with their purchasing power, I think.
I just had somebody ask, how do you find a good property manager?
If you have a good real estate agent, I would say that they'd probably be your best source for that, but you could always interview several of them, and use whomever you feel most confident in. But I know at least here, Lisa and I have several good recommendations for that. We work with over the years that are fair on pricing, and also, always take care of their clients properly. Sorry if I'm having audio problems. I'm not sure why.
It's the world of Zoom, isn't it?
Usually I'm too loud, now I'm too soft.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I think that's a good point. You want to have a real estate investment team. You want to have a good real estate agent who is accomplished in helping investors both buy and sell property. You want a really great accountant or CPA. We keep reiterating that because that's where you're going to get your. I'm not a lawyer. They let me write contracts, but I'm not a lawyer or an accountant. And get referrals from those people for property managers. Talk to other investors. If you belong to an investment club or something, get ideas of who is good. I know that property managers can be a sticking point, but I know several clients of ours have been very happy with.
And don't forget your mortgage person is a member of the team as well.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Absolutely.
They solve a lot of problems.
That's so true.
And also often have good recommendations for property managers or anything else as well.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
realtors.
Yes, of course.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Anybody else have anything? No.
Good job, team.
Thanks. Well, your team will be back. We'll come up with new topics to discuss because there's lots of stuff that we can go into more in depth. We will see if we can't get an accountant on who can come in and provide their expertise. And we've recorded this, so we'll send out a link to it if you need to check back with it or if you want to forward it to anybody. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.